Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Sunday, October 22nd, and today is the 16th day of the catastrophe that's happening in Gaza and also in Israel. And today I thought, rather than I will give you some updates, I will provide some facts and statistics, but I thought I just would call you to pray. So it's been more than 2 weeks. Today is Sunday, so many of us have returned from Sunday worship. We've been having weekly prayer services. We'll have another one this Wednesday and Friday this week. I think it's the 27th. His Holiness Pope Francis has called for a day of fasting and a day of prayer. Churches for Middle East Peace will have a virtual gathering. We'll set the time. If you follow us, if you're signed up for our newsletter, we'll let you know about that. We'll put that out on social media. But we'd invite you to join us. Just pray for peace, pray for an end to violence, pray for de-escalation, pray for a ceasefire, pray for the end of the siege on Gaza, that the more than 2 million people there would have water. Pray that Israel would give up the need for revenge, that Hamas would return hostages, that this would not escalate to a regional warfare. And so I wanted to go through some specific prayer requests. We do pray for the return of hostages. You heard that last week the 2 Americans were released. Some news was reporting that Hamas wanted to release Israeli hostages. We do know that there has been conversations and negotiations, and that Israel said before they will not negotiate with terrorists, but we're praying for the release of hostages. Pray against politics. There are so many political dynamics going on. You know, this next year, there's a presidential election in the United States, which contributes to what's happening. And the political regime in Israel was about to fall. I mean, Israel was at a crisis before, this conflict happened, before the October 7th attacks. And so pray against the political dynamics. Pray for the people in power, that they would make decisions that honor humanity, that de-escalate conflict. Pray for water. Pray for the people in Gaza for water. We just heard from UNRWA, the UN refugee agency that's meeting the needs of about a quarter of the people in Gaza. They have about 500,000 refugees they're responsible for, and they put out an alert today that said they're almost out of fuel. Some news is reporting that there were fuel tanks that came in the first 20 or so trucks. The reports I read said there were 35 trucks in the first shipment that came through this weekend, but then lots of news is reporting it was only 20 trucks. Some fuel was designated. My understanding is that went to hospitals. UNRWA said they received no fuel in that first shipment, and they're announcing that they're going to run out of fuel. If they run out of fuel, that means no water. It means no food. And so they put out an alert that said all humanitarian assistance from UNRWA that's going to those 500,000 people will completely stop. There was an attempt to send in, so I think Saturday was the first day that trucks went into Gaza. There was an attempt to send in more trucks, and then we heard that there was increased bombing or more bombing at the Rafah border with Egypt. So pray for humanitarian corridors, pray for humanitarian access, pray that the bombing would stop. We know that there's also rocket fire continuing from Gaza into Israel. So against violence and praying for de-escalation, but those are some of the specifics of what that looks like. I want to pray specifically against disease. We're starting to get reports, many of the people in Gaza are starting to consume contaminated water, and we're getting news that chickenpox, scabies, diarrhea, all these types of things happen when dirty water is consumed and when there's a lack of sanitation. And there is a significant concern about a cholera outbreak and even more severe waterborne illnesses. So pray against that. Pray that things don't escalate in the West Bank. For the first time since the early 2000s, fighter jets from Israel have hit targets in the West Bank, particularly in the city of Jenin. There was a mosque that was bombed. It said that Hamas and militants were in the mosque, and that's why it was bombed. There have been several dozen Palestinians that were killed in clashes in the last several weeks. And I just want to remind people that in addition to the 2.3 million people in Gaza, there are more than 2.5 million civilians, in addition to Israeli Jewish settlers that are living in the West Bank. And so we want to pray against escalations in the West Bank, and we want to pray against regional warfare. Tens of thousands of Israelis in northern Israel are being evacuated from villages, from at least one city. We know that things are continuing to escalate at the northern border of Israel with Hezbollah and Lebanon. Syria announced this weekend that Israel had attacked their airports, and so pray against a war between Syria and Israel. And then also we received reports that some rockets were fired at an air base in Western Iraq, where US and international forces were being hosted. And so we're starting to see these escalations in the broader region. And, the US is sending not only more artillery, but just the potential of the US presence there and regional escalations is deeply, deeply disconcerting. So please pray against that as well. The other thing I wanted to raise is in the past 24 hours, there was a report that a rabbi in Detroit, the president of a synagogue there, Samantha Wall, was stabbed in front of her home and murdered over the weekend. And a hate crime, it's being investigated. The FBI, my understanding is a number of the Jewish groups are calling for an FBI investigation. And so pray for her family. What devastating news. Pray against anti-Semitic acts. We pray for the family of Wadia Faume, who was the young 6-year-old boy who was stabbed last week, the Palestinian American child who was killed. And so we're seeing an increase in anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim actions here in the United States. And so there's a lot to pray for as we work towards peace. We at Churches for Middle East Peace have a number of significant meetings coming up with U.S. government officials, including the White House, the State Department this next week. There's actions being taken on Capitol Hill, including a resolution calling for a ceasefire. And so we pray that you and we ask that you would join us in taking action, in contacting your elected officials. We'll have a briefing on Thursday as well. And so continue to stay engaged. We worry, the world often pays attention when these things happen. And then as time goes on, I know there's a lot of other parts of the world where there's trauma or where there's violence or, a lot of life happens. And so thank you for your continued support. Thank you for your engagement. I'm just ending a weekend here in Phoenix, and I'm headed to LA, where I'll be with some church leaders. And then after that, I'll be in Seattle speaking to some churches. And if you want us to come to your church, we have staff all over the country. And so invite us to come. We'll give a briefing, we'll pray with you. We want to help educate Christians so that we can respond in a way that helps bring peace and helps build bridges and helps advocate for justice in the midst of this. So might God go before us as we continue to work for peace and an end to this horrific, horrific violence in Gaza and the broader Middle East.